Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I'll be talking about the Corfu crisis of 1923, a very important case study of the League of Nations and a very important failure. With this case study, we can learn a lot of shortcomings of the League of Nations. Okay, so let me begin. The Corfu crisis began on August 27th of 1923 when an Italian general called Enrico Tellini was murdered in Greece along the border with Albania. Him and his team were drawing up the border. They were killed by unidentified bandits. However, Mussolini, the Italian dictator, blamed the Greek government, and he claimed that they were in on it, and it was a planned assassination. He issued some terms to Greece, saying that if Greece didn't accept these terms, Italy would invade. And obviously, Greece didn't accept these terms because they were unacceptable, because they involved very, very high restitutions, like very, very high fines. And Mussolini, when he heard that the Greeks had refused, used this as an excuse to invade the Greek island of Corfu. If you're wondering where the Greek island of Corfu is, it is right here. This is Greece, and Italy is about here, a little bit to the west. The Greek foreign minister Politis appealed to the League of Nations, claiming that the occupation of Corfu endangered peace and was against League policy, which was true. It was against League policy. Italy was a very important member on the Council of the League of Nations, a permanent member of the Council, and they had openly been aggressive and invaded Corfu, which can be seen as an act of war. It was a massive escalation in the situation. The League Commission of Inquiry was sent to investigate Tellini's death, the general, and rapidly concluded that the Greek government had not been involved. I think the whole thing, for their resolution to be made, it only took 5 days. So when they found out that the Greek government was not involved and Italy had just needed an excuse to invade, the League condemned Italian actions. And now the League is faced with a task. What are they going to do about Italy invading Corfu without their approval, without a good reason to do so, and against League policy? Well, what does the League do? There's some dispute within the League on what to do with Italy. In fact, they can't really agree, and so in the end, spoiler alert, they don't really do anything. Because the British representative on the council, Robert Cecil, favored a hardline approach to Italy, and he wanted to punish Italy for what they did, so Italy would evacuate Corfu and the situation could be resolved. However, the British government did not agree. They did because they didn't want to damage trade of Italy. So the British government had its own interests in mind, and they'd rather preserve their economic status instead of carrying out trade sanctions against Italy, because this would have harmed their own economy, and they didn't want to do so. Even though Britain's own representative on the council favored sanctions against Italy. France also did not side with Greece or the League resolution, because they themselves were occupying the Ruhr as of January of 1923, and it would have been hypocritical for them to condemn Italy occupying Corfu. Mussolini threatened to leave the League if it intervened in Corfu, and the issue was delegated to the Conference of Ambassadors. Italy was a very important member of the Conference of Ambassadors, and the Italians pressured the Greeks to pay 50 million lire, which was as much as their original compensation, as much as the original terms of the ultimatum, as a compensation. And then Italy evacuates Corfu when the Greeks have paid in September of 1923. So how successful was the League? Despite the Italian aggressive act of escalation, an all-out war was avoided. And this is important. The League's ultimate goal was preventing another world war from breaking out. The big picture goal is that. So an all-out war was avoided. However, and the situation was also resolved pretty quickly. In only about a month and a half, Italy leaves Corfu. However, how was the League not successful? Corfu is one of the biggest League failures of the 1920s for the League of Nations. Italy, it showed how the League of Nations was overruled by its big important powers, and one of the four members of the council, one of the four permanent members of the council, the most important executive body of the League of Nations, had an openly aggressive country as a part of it. And what does it say of the League of Nations, which is supposed to be a peace-loving organization, if one of its main members was able to carry out such an aggressive act like this, invading another country. The League of Nations had been powerless to stop Italian aggression. The issue had been passed on by the Conference of Ambassadors, which effectively undermined the League's authority. The League, in fact, had been trying to tried to get the countries to impose and persuade the other countries to impose sanctions towards Italy, because this would have been what stopped Italy in the first place and made them leave. However, the countries weren't willing to do so, and the League was left essentially powerless. It was overruled by the Conference of Ambassadors, and this is important because Corfu shows how the countries put their own self-interest before that of the League of Nations as well. Britain and France didn't want to impose any sanctions because they didn't want to harm their own economies and involve their own militaries. The League also had difficulty persuading countries to cooperate in enforcing sanctions, and the League's policies were less about justice than about the desires of large powers, especially when dealing with the weaker ones. Corfu is an important instance. Later on, I'll talk about the Greece-Bulgaria one as well. But essentially, the Greece-Bulgaria of 1925, I believe, dispute was solved by the League of Nations because it was dealing with two small countries. However, the League couldn't do anything when it was going against one big country attacking a smaller one. Even though the smaller country was the victim, the one in the right, and the League supported that, it couldn't do anything against the bigger country. It also showed how little consideration the larger powers had for the League and its policies.